What does it mean to live well for you personally? Yeah. Is there a well, or is it really what we believe?
I think to live well, honestly, it's to be in alignment with yourself. When we function outside of alignment and we are just chasing the dollar, chasing capitalism, chasing the next big thing, you're pulling yourself away further and further from who you are. To me, I think of someone who's like living well. Like for me to live well, it really just means, am I surrounded by the people I feel at peace with, that I feel happy with? I love being the glue of my social, my family center, everything.
In my life, the people that sacrificed so much for me to be here, those people that gave me that advice in prison that helped me to get out, I live my life every day to honor them.
Yeah.
And the work that I do, holding myself accountable, admitting to my mistakes, but then trying to do better, I always think about them. And so for you to do that is truly special and powerful. So Dr. Payal Beri, how are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the How to Battle podcast. Yeah. I did your podcast.
Yes.
First to start, talk a little bit about that, and then I'll get into what I normally do when I start. But talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah.
Because from one podcaster to another, like I found that our podcast has some similarity in a really unique way. So let's start there.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
So the reason for Reframing Perspectives with Payal Beri, is one of the things that just became really important was just the fact that there's so many people that go through life that don't necessarily understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. Or I think we're so busy in our lives that we sometimes forget to just be curious. And how curiosity can actually shift our perspectives. It can open up our understanding of things. It gives us context. And so it became really important that, how do we look at whether it's everyday challenges, whether it's our relationships, or whether it's things that are really impacting our social justice system, our humanity as a whole, but we just get fed this information. We get clickbaits. We get, media that is full of propaganda that's telling us things. But if we were to just look at things from a different perspective, how could that change the way that we connect? How could that change the way that we see someone's battle, someone's challenge? So it became really important to me to bring on guests like yourself that could help to actually give an insight into an experience, into a life, into something that you probably have no idea about. You've never lived it. You've never experienced it, and you've never had a conversation with someone who's experienced it, yet you've got a lot of opinions about it.
Right.
So that was where Reframing Perspectives is all about.
I love that. It's just, and then for people that don't know about other people's experiences and how it is in their world, it's a great opportunity for them to learn. So when I was on there, I always talk about, when I was on yours and the other podcasts I've been on, I talk about my experiences in prison growing up. Even now, and you can kind of see the way that my life evolved, and with all your guests in some way you see that
100%.
And then you develop the empathy, because you're like, wow, that was a kid once and he talked about that, and then he went through this, and that's why he went to prison. And you start to realize that, okay, well, my initial perception of that person was off.
Exactly.
I didn't really think about the whole picture.
The context.
Yeah.
The context is so important. And curiosity, right?
Yeah.
So we only get context if we get curious. And I think what was so important about your specific story that most people wouldn't think is that when they think of someone who ended up in prison, they're going to think that, oh, they grew up in a bad neighborhood. They, didn't have the right support system. They didn't have this, they didn't have that. But when you shared that, no, actually, my dad was a doctor. My mom was a nurse. I grew up playing baseball. Like, that throws people off, because it's throwing off, again, the propaganda, the media, the stories that people want you to believe, so that you don't see them as human, right? It's the same reason where bringing somebody on who has maybe been homeless at some point, right? And people will say like, oh my God, like they're homeless and, they need to get up and figure it out. Well, okay, when you lose a job, you go into scarcity mindset. Now imagine being on the streets, having to like survival mode and trying to figure things out. And also one of the biggest reasons that people actually end up on the street is not because of drugs and mental illness. It's actually because they've lost a job or they can't pay their hospital bills or the hospital bills of who they care about, right? And so when they can't pay and they lose everything, they end up on the streets, and then mental illness and drugs become secondary to that.
Yeah.
And so being able to show people essentially that you and I are only one circumstance, one decision, one choice away from the life that you may be judging right now.
Yeah. And a lot of, also a big key thing is, so a person that grows up with more privilege,
yeah,
and they lose their job or something bad happens to them, they know in their mind they have something to fall back on, or somebody. For example, if a person, like during the fires, I know people that lost their homes, unfortunately, but a lot of them were able to go stay with other family members. They had parents, they had, all these other people to support and help them. Mm-hmm. But like in the community in which I ended up going to and learning about, many people there don't have that.
Right.
So it's like when they lose everything or lose a job, they don't have anybody they can go to that's going to open their door or even give them a couch to lay on.
Right.
And so when you have that mentality, when you lose something like that or go through something, it's a lot more traumatic than a person who has somewhere to go.
100%.
Right. So and so that's it. You got to really understand that, right? To truly know. And so, yeah, I love that.
And it's also just, even within my own friend circle, it's really interesting. Culture makes a big difference as well, right? I come from an Indian background. I'm South Asian. In our culture, parents want you to be at home. They want you, you live there, right? And when you say you want to move out, they will give you 20 reasons why you shouldn't move out. They want to keep you there. Other cultures don't have that. It's more of you're on your own. And even now, till today, like, when I first started building my business, I started building my business 4 months before COVID hit. And I left my job and said, I'm going to go for this. And then COVID hits, and the work that I'm in, contracts, everything paused. Yeah. So it became really scary. And I was living in Chicago at the time. So for me to be able to pack up and not have to be there all alone, come back home and say, okay, I can move in with my parents. They were so excited. Thank God, like finally, right? You're able to have that. Now, recently, I actually had a, friend of mine who asked me, she's like, do you feel spoiled? And I found that to be really interesting because that, to me, that shared again more. I posed it back to her, like, how come? What makes it seem that, I would feel spoiled about this? And she goes, well, because like you get to be at home, your parents just take care of you, all these things. And I said, I'm grateful. I'm absolutely grateful. Yeah. I understand what this means. Yeah. And where it was coming from is that when she was struggling and she asked her parents for a little help, they said, no, figure it out. So even though they had the means, the parents had the means, they had everything, but culturally for them, you don't do that. Yeah. So in her mind, she is now in a place where she's just like, that's it. I only have my back and I need to do this. Right. So when you come from that, I understand why for someone else, I may look like I'm potentially spoiled, but I feel like I would be spoiled if I was taking advantage of that. Right. But I'm so grateful every day. And I look at it as, wow, my parents are in their mid 70s. They're aging. How lucky am I in my 40s that I get to spend this kind of quality time with them? Mm-hmm. And how is it special that, fine, yes, my mom gets to make me home cooked food, but I'm helping her with her medical stuff. I'm helping her. I'm showing up. I'm her emotional support. We're having evening conversations. They're not lonely. Loneliness is one of the major reasons why elderlies actually pass away. So I look at those things as like, what is the actual exchange and relationship that's happening here? Because I get their support, and in return, I get to also provide that support versus thinking of like, all right, whatever, I got a place to stay and I can build my business. Yeah,
your gratitude and your knowing of like the situation and you doing things to help. Yeah. You're not taking advantage of it. You're not being ungrateful. And I think that's important because some people, they can't help that they come from privilege, right? So I think even that is like, people who don't come from there shouldn't judge people like that or shouldn't feel like they think that they're better or whatever, because they were born into that situation. But now if the person is a shitty person, that's a different story. But if they're grateful and they're helping and they're giving back and they're doing good stuff in the world, then there's nothing wrong with that.
I always look at it this way, is that when someone's asking me a question that to you and I may be like, how do you not know that, right? Like that's the immediate response, because we've gone through things in life that others had the privilege of not having to go through. And I look at it as because they haven't had the experience, because of all of us live in a version of our world that we know that's based off of our experiences, who we spend time with, the neighborhoods that we're in, the media we consume, all of that. So if they're asking a question, if I judge them for it, I've just now shut down the opportunity for them to actually connect with me and for me to open their mind or open their curiosity more. So instead, if I look at that as like, oh, wow, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and ask a little bit more before I start answering it, and just ask, like, what's prompting this question, right? What is it about this that you're curious about? I want to know where it's coming from for them. And then once I have an idea of like, oh, well, because I see on TV, blah, 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 or, I'm just curious. Like I ran into someone, or I see a lot of like, now I live in San Francisco and I see a lot of homeless people and I don't understand. Got it. Yeah. Everyone's always trying to understand. And whenever they're asking something, it always has something to do with what they're going through.
Yeah.
So when you answer it from a place of curiosity, and I'll keep saying that over and over again, but if you just answer it with asking more questions, you're actually going to then invite them into like learning more, right? To your point, it's not their fault that they don't know. In fact, I'm like, how lucky that you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. You have this ability to just like pause and ask the questions. Go on, take that curiosity and go on the journey. Yeah. Try to figure it out. Yeah. That's such a powerful skill that many people struggle with because they're just spontaneous or they're compulsive. They just react, right? So many people, including myself in prison and before prison, was just reactionary. If I had a cellmate who had, a bad day and he, it caused like tension in the cell, it was always like go to like, do you have a problem with me? Like, do you have a problem with me? Or it's always an aggressive, like, what's going on? Like, we're not looking at like, well, maybe he did go through something today. Maybe I should question and be curious about like, are you all right? What happened? Like, and when I started doing that, it shifted everything. Yeah. Like my outcomes in life were different. Things were more positive. My relationships were better. More opportunities came just from shifting and taking that moment to pause, as I call it, to be a STAR. Yeah. Which is to stop, think, assess, and respond. Oh, nice. So STAR is an acronym. So So I think about that when I'm in the moment ready to say something. I think about that and I utilize that to pause and really just look at everything before I react to it. Yeah. Yeah. So do you have any like tools in your tool belt that you use to help you in situations when you get angry or when you're feeling like emotional or you're feeling like doing something that people can use and benefit from?
I mean, you kind of touched on it. Like I call it like the power of curiosity, and I'll give you an example actually. So last year, I went out for a girls' night. And I went out with these girls who I never have. Like we're actually in a bigger circle. So I see them always at group things, but I've never gone out one-on-one with them, right? So I went out with them. They're a few years older than me, and they've had a much more homogenous, like they spend time, their social circles a lot more homogenous, right? So they hang out just with South Asians typically. They've also had a very, like they follow the path, like, got married, had kids, had the dog, have the house and all of those things. And very early on in life, they just really followed it, right? So I'm like this foreign alien to them because, I'm in my 40s, I'm not married, I don't have kids, I'm an entrepreneur, and I kind of just do things the way that the path that I take. Yeah. So we're there and they ask me, we were talking about some weddings or things like that. And then one of them asked me like, oh, I'm really curious. And it was truly like, she got excited about this. She's like, I'm really curious. How do your friends who are married feel comfortable and accept having you around knowing that you are single and don't have kids. And goes on to then say that, you know, because your life and your life choices are so unnatural, you live an unnatural life.
Okay. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how to respond. Like,
right.
I was putting myself in your shoes, and I'm like, how would I respond to that?
Most people would be like, get the F out, right?
Yeah.
Or they'd be like, how dare you say that to me? And my response was, first, of course, I did have that. I could feel the reaction coming up. And here's the thing. I know them. They're genuinely sweet girls. I like them. They're fun. They're kind. They're incredible mothers, you know? So context. They're not randoms that I don't know who are trying to be, you know, just judge me in a way that, you know, they're coming from a place, again, of they only know what they know.
Yeah.
And so I said, you know, my friendships, first of all, aren't determined based off of relationship status. But I'm curious to like, what about this is, you know, why is this curious for you? And she said, well, you know, I'm just curious because, you know, my daughter, who's 19 years old, has been asking me a lot of questions about, you know, why did you get married? Why did you have kids? How did it prevent you from your career path? Do you think your career would have been different if you didn't have kids? You know, what was the reason? Like, you know, what do you think about marriage? She's been asking a lot of questions and she's been answering it. And I guess her daughter's come to a decision that she does not want to have kids or get married. And she wants to, you know, that's just not the path she wants to take. So immediately I now know the reason why she's asking me this question. She's seeing what would my daughter's life be in 20 years from now, right? What is that path that I so don't know and understand that I'm worried about? It makes me nervous. What is her friend circle going to be like? Is she going to be lonely, right? All these things. I'm like, got it. I see where she's going with this. So what I respond with then is, how lucky is your daughter that she gets to have this safe relationship with you, that at 19 years old, she's asking you these like really important like questions about life that I wasn't asking these things at 19. I barely got to this decision in 30s, you know? And I said, and what a great compliment to you as a mom that she feels safe enough to come to you to ask these questions. And how awesome should you feel that you have a daughter who is so intentional about her decisions? You can feel so good that no matter what decision your daughter takes, she does it with a lot of curiosity. She's asking questions. She's digging deep. She's not making that decision impulsively. It's not one day I don't want to get married, the next day I do. One day I want to do this, I don't want to do. She's asking and you're providing and she's getting. So whether, and also she's 19, you know, whether in 10 years from now that decision still sticks or she meets the love of her life and that changes, you can feel so secure and confident that whatever decision she's making, it's done with a lot of thoughtfulness.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example of shifting the perspective, right? And I was thinking about when you were saying that, another thing for her to remember, if she's listening or somebody else in a similar situation, is I just did a podcast. I interviewed a woman, Zara, who she got pregnant when she was 16 years old. And she's like, I had to grow up quick. Like I didn't have a childhood. Like I had to grow up. I had to take care of kids. I had responsibility. I had to go get a job, take care of 16 years old. And here you are, you have a daughter that's 19, that's that self-reflective and that insightful to say, I'm going to question this, like thinking about it. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Right.
But it's all about how you shifted the perspective of it.
Yeah.
So that's powerful.
Yeah. And I also just think that, you know, my life may seem unnatural to her, but to your point right there, talking about Zara, you know, your life, right? Mine, whose life is normal? Because even the ones who live a normal life of you know, what we deem in society, the marriage and the kids and the house and the suburbs, whatever, but guaranteed every neighbor is living it differently, right? There may be, you know, married couples that are together only because of the kids, not because they still love each other. I actually said this to her as well. I was like, you know, I don't know. I think that when it comes to even friendships or relationships and connections, right? I have friends who've been married but struggled with getting pregnant for 12 years. Yeah. I have friends who are a mom and they actually resent being a mother. You know, I have friends who are dying to be a parent but they're not able to adopt. So like everyone's situation is different. So again, that's where I think that we've been fed this idea of this normalcy. But if you were to have a conversation bring 5 people in the room that all have that standard 9-to-5 corporate job, all those things, but guaranteed everyone has gone through something that someone else hasn't.
Yeah. Were you like the 19-year-old that you talked about? Was that you at one point, or did you make a conscious decision to say, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have kids? Mm-hmm. Or is that something that's still something that you want? And I guess my thing is, on a personal level, if you can had a magic wand to create whatever life you wanted, what would that look like?
So it's so interesting because, again, you know, being Indian, I grew up thinking that I'm going to get married. Yeah. I wanted 4 kids. You know, I wanted twins. I was like I wanted suburb. I love the idea of white picket fences. Yeah. You know, I mean, that was me in my 20s. My 20s was so defined by I need to meet a partner and have a family and do these things, right? It wasn't until my mid-30s when I actually reflected and looked at I just had ended a sour relationship. And I think that was probably the reason where it made me think about like, wait a second, what do I actually want? You know? And that's where it was. And I will say that I have said this for a long time, is that I still would love to, whether it's marriage or a life partner, I want to go through life with somebody. I want to have a best friend in that way. But if I don't have kids, I'm okay. And in fact, I got to the point where I don't want kids. Part of that being that, you know, again, the path that I've taken, my career and my entrepreneurship and things that I really want to fulfill in life just came at a little bit later age. And so it was, as a woman, you do always end up having to sacrifice. And I looked at it as that I don't necessarily want to sacrifice that I'm finally there and finally enjoying this. I personally, for me, I don't want that. But no, like if it was like my perfect life, you know, I would have a life partner. And, you know, I'd be living in New York City. That is where my soul and spirit is. And, you know, I would be just really dedicating my life to social impact and purpose, making a difference. And I always think about it from that angle of, one, I have 2 young nieces who I adore, obsess over, and I get to like be the cool auntie for them. But I'm a macro thinker. And so I look at it as like, I see my brother with his kids and I see how much of their life revolves around them, right? Their practices, their this, their that, whatever. They barely have time for themselves on to do anything. Yeah. I used to be a clinical therapist. I worked with kids who were in the foster care system. I've seen that up close and personal. And I look at it more as if with the work that I do and whoever that life partner is, if we are, you know, I truly honestly love to see power couples. Yeah. Like I love those. And so I'm like, I want to find my power couple. But if I could do something to actually help shift the foster care system, if I could do something to help shift the system itself and make an impact there, I look at that as I get to now make impact in multiple kids' lives, not just one that comes from, you know, my genetics.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. Because I do work in the foster care system and I go speak to them and just recently delivered some gifts to them. Yeah. And in me, myself being in that system as well, when I was young, I understand it. And after giving them the gifts, you know, you don't really know if they, how they received it, because they're very like closed off, like I was. Like you don't want to show any emotion. You don't even want to like, you might say thank you, but you're not going to like show true emotion in the moment because you're protecting yourself, because there's other kids around that you have to be careful. You don't want to be perceived in a certain way. Right. But later on, I get a text message from the lady who facilitated us going in there, and it's just like all these kids made like cards and drawings, with like thank you, with how to battle on there. And it was like these drawings, and I'll show you after. These drawings were like you could tell they were created by children. Yeah. They had that feeling, that look of like a child that was in school that created something they brought home to their parents. And for me, like when I saw that, I was like, this is like why I do what I do, and it's because they need that. Yep. And so to be able to continue to do that is a gift for us. Yeah. And we definitely have to talk more about how we can connect on stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's where you going out there and showing what life can be like, I think is so important, right? And why we need more people like you who can role model that like you don't have to choose these other paths. Like you don't have to be this tough guy and this, like it's okay to be a kid, know, and it is really sad the fact that like we have so many broken systems and the people who suffer most from it are kids. Because I always look at it as these kids or, they didn't ask to be brought into this world. And now they're in a system, and where do they have a fighting chance? And if you're surrounded in a space where you're seeing like, well, what's the point? Yeah. Right? Then why wouldn't they choose the paths that are going to take them down like darker roads?
Yeah, I love that. So I got a quote for you, and it kind of fitting too. So I always ask my guests to quote. Quotes are very powerful for me, and I've always loved to read them and write. And I used to, in prison, have them on a Post-it on my wall to remind me of things. This is one that I found. It's a Tibetan proverb. So I'm interested in your perspective on this one.
Okay.
So the secret to living well and longer is eat half, walk double, laugh triple, and love without measure.
Can you say it again?
Yeah. It's definitely more of a deeper one. The secret to living well and longer is eat half, walk double, laugh triple, and love without measure. What does that mean to you?
I think it has everything to do with what we've just been talking about, right? Funny enough, I came here from another thing that I was delivering, and it was about relationships. And when this quote is talking about, just the laugh triple and love unconditionally, it really is that. It's like there's nothing that is negative about forming relationships and caring, right? So I look at it, that quote to me that just really says that. It's just about like, if you pause, the power of pause, and you connect with people, that right there is actually what's going to nourish you. Yeah. That right there is actually what's going to fulfill you. Like, gratitude is one of the most powerful ways that changes the chemistry in your brain. And who doesn't love it? Like, I do this all day long with people. Like, I will actually send someone a message to their manager and be like, oh my gosh, Carlos helped me so much with this. I just wanted to give a shout out. Thank you so much, whatever. There's nothing that is going to come negative from actually caring about somebody. Yeah. And so the more, like, that's what that quote really just speaks out to me more, is like, just show up. Yeah. Just show up. Just be, like, humans need humans. We're social creatures. We need each other to like thrive. And the more that we like recluse and we become more about our individualism, the more we're actually just like weakening ourselves.
Yeah. And I actually, let me get it back out, because so a part of it that really stood out to me was, so the secret to living well and longer. So we look at that, like living well and living longer. What does it mean to live well? Like, I want to break this down a little bit, because it's very interesting. Like, because as I read it, I'm like, well, what does well mean? Because that could be, subjective, right? Like, what does it mean to live well? I know a guy in prison that he went in front of the judge and told the judge, like, they gave him life in prison. He told the judge, I was tired of being free. I want to go to prison. I like the structure. I'm somebody in there. Everything's brought to me. That was his mindset. He went to prison. He lived well in his world.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to live well for you personally? And also just your interpretation on that of like, is there a well? Like, or is it really what we believe to be well?
So powerful. I think what you said right there is really powerful. And I think to live well, honestly, it's to be in alignment with yourself. It's when we function outside of alignment and we are just chasing the dollar, chasing capitalism, chasing the next big thing, right? Oh, I need to be part of this. This is the hot thing. I need to be there, right? You're pulling yourself away further and further from who you are. And so to me, I think of someone who's like living well. Like for me to live well, it really just means that like, am I surrounded by the people that I'm just I feel at peace with, that I feel happy with, right? I love people. I'm an extrovert. Like I want to have those people around me all the time. But living well to me is, you know, even though like I don't necessarily have a desire to become a mom, I love being the glue of my social, my family center, everything. And I look at that more as, you know, so my grandmother, who's a big influence for me, we have the same birthday, 60 years apart. And she passed away. So my company, RK Empathy, RK are her initials. And, you know,
that's powerful. I was actually going to ask that too, where that come from. And you have her tattooed on you?
I do. So
yeah. Is this your only tattoo?
No, I have another one, but it's also dedicated to her.
Wow.
But so the RK is her. And I always think about, you know, how do I want to keep the legacy of her life alive? And my grandmother, she was born at the time, it was Pakistan and India were one. And so when they migrated over, you know, she had already was married, had a kid, and then partition happened, she moved over, right? So she has gone through seeing a partition of her country, having to move her entire life, everything her ancestors knew, into a different part of the country because of the split. Having to start over. She's raising 6 kids, moving around with her husband, all these things that she's having to do. But the resilience that woman had, the glow, she was independent, she was sassy, sarcastic, but everyone in the neighborhood knew her, right? Up until like she could. I remember even 85, 89, you know, she would be holding the walls, but she's going to make it happen. She's going to like the guys who are coming out with the fruit in the neighborhood, like they know her. The temple guy knows her. Like, but it was that they know that she's also just, this is her, she brings people together, you know? And I think my passion for connectivity, for empathy, for community, it really comes from who she was and how much I feel. And it's because like, maybe it's because it's like, oh, we have the same birthday, 60 years apart. I feel like it's almost like I feel a responsibility of like, I want to keep that alive. So when I think about living well, I think of it as how much of her legacy have I been able to create by making impact in other people's lives?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's such a, I think about what better way to honor her legacy than to name your company after that. Like that's amazing. And I know, I don't know her, but I know her in a way because like my grandmother, like I was really close to at one point in life, and she passed away when I was in, I don't think I was in prison yet, but I was already in the streets. So she passed away. I didn't really get to say goodbye or anything. But I look at it like in my life, the people that have sacrificed so much for me to be here, those people that gave me that advice in prison that helped me to get out, I live my life every day to honor them. Yeah. And the work that I do, you know, holding myself accountable, admitting to my mistakes, but then trying to do better. I always think about them. And so for you to do that is truly special and powerful.
I feel like you'll be aligned on this. Well, actually, let me ask you before I answer myself, but What do you think about the sentence of like, I'm a self-made person?
Yeah, I don't believe anybody's self-made.
Yeah.
I believe everybody has people behind the scenes that support them and to help them get to where they're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
And I think that that's another form of like that connection, that laugh more, loving more,
Yeah.
is that give credit where credit is due. And I look at it as, you know, yeah, like my grandmother, my parents, you know, if they didn't do X, like, you know, what would that mean differently to me? I'm a third culture kid. So, you know, never grew up in India, but grew up moving around. I like 18 times before I was 10 to different countries, you know, didn't come to the US until I was like 9. My welcome to America was like Queens, New York, you know, and moved around a bunch. But it's like, if I didn't have that also, that life, it may not have given me this absolute passion for seeing that we have more in common as humans, right? If I grew up in the same neighborhood that I live today in, I never traveled, I never went anywhere, I may not have had that. And so I personally think traveling the world, whatever reason it may be, is the best education someone can get in understanding life outside of yourself.
I agree. What are your thoughts on education, like college, higher learning for kids out there that are listening to this?
Yeah.
A lot of young people are questioning if they should go down that path. There's people on social media saying it's a waste of time. There's people that saying, I mean, I went and I'm a big advocate for it because at the very least you learn how to learn. You know, you may not pursue that, but you're going to learn how to learn. You're going to, and social skills, there's a lot of benefits. What are your thoughts on it?
100% agree.
Yeah.
You know, I think education is your ticket outside of poverty. I think your education is your ticket outside of whatever situation, circumstance you're in. As much as we want to say that, like, oh, you don't need it, or you see these outliers of, you know, people, Mark Zuckerberg, like, you know, quit, and like this person quit, and look at them now. Those are the outliers that we always shine, right? When we look at like the Forbes list of like 20 under 20, 30 under 30, those are the outliers. And not to say that someone can't become that outlier, but education, to your point, it teaches you social skills, right? It teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to think outside the box. It teaches you how to get curious about what else exists, right? I was a film major. And like, I was a choreographer, I was a dancer. I thought I was going to be a Bollywood choreographer, you know, that was my first goal. Yeah. But I'm a psychologist, you know, very different. But it was that I still told today, put so much creativity as a part of my work that I do. And at the end of the day, you got to pay, you know, bills. And I firmly believe, especially because we live in a capitalistic society, you got to play the game. And if you want to win, right? And the way to win is the more financially successful you can be, the more you have the means then to give back into those communities. But the education is going to give you the knowledge of how to like break through those pieces. I also think that the people that you meet in college, the people that you meet along the way, the internships that you get, all of those things, those are people, like we just talked about, there's no self-made person. Those people are going to open the doors.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. So many, when I got out of prison, it wasn't me that opened the doors, really. I mean, I opened it. It wasn't me that led me to the door. I didn't know where to go. I was lost. I didn't understand anything. Everything was new. It was the people I encountered that led me there. And in some cases, they even opened the door because, you know, when you see like that person open the door and kind of lead you in, it was literally like that. Because even when I got to the door, my self-doubt and limiting beliefs was keeping me a lot of times from opening it. So they even went over and beyond to help me. And then because they saw the potential in me so much to where they even kind of nudged me in. Yeah. And so that's what education does. It challenges you, it stretches you, it nudges you toward a direction that may not be your calling, but along the journey, you'll discover so much about yourself and you'll gain skills and things that will help you when you do find your calling.
100%.
Right. So that's what worked for me. Right.
Yeah. And you're obviously a naturally very smart person too, right? Like, I don't think that you would have been able to also, to be honest, survive in the streets as far as you went if you weren't as smart as you are. And, you know, what I look at it as is like, you know, if we talk about like corporate people, right? It's like transferable skills and all this stuff, right? Like, you're strategic, you have an entrepreneur mindset, you have all these things. You just took the skills that you were doing in a way that was probably not the right path for you. And now you're applying it into something that is so powerful. So what I always like to say is that, you know, how you'll know what's the career path for you, what you should do. Like, I think about full circle, you know, is don't follow the path in career that you think is going to make me the most money per se. Follow, like, look at what skills you have, what you're naturally gifted at, right? And when you look at what you're naturally gifted at, and then you find careers that tend to reward that, you're going to go so far with it. So, you know, for me, like, I'm a creative, but I like, you know, being a speaker and, you know, being able to articulate my thoughts in that way where I can express it. And as a psychologist, like, it worked for me because of like the natural strengths that I have of being able to assess someone, being able to see, like, reframe people's like way of thinking. Like, that to me is exciting. It's fun. You put me behind a computer and tell me to make PowerPoint presentations all day. I don't care. I don't care that slide 1 and slide 2 don't have the same font. I genuinely do not care. And I'm going to drain my energy. And then I'm going to think that I'm not good enough. Right? So when I was in corporate, I was in learning and development, and my job was actually an instructional designer, which is to build the training things. And I would keep telling my manager, like, let me facilitate, let me get out there. And she'd be like, no, this is what you're doing is more impactful. I'm like, I don't care. That's where I can make impact. And over the period of time, because I knew that just wasn't my natural strength, and I wasn't good at it either, my confidence diminished. And so by the end of that job, I really doubted that I was even good at anything because I was doing something that I'm just not good at, and it just doesn't connect for me, right? There's difference between being someone who's naturally good at something, having an interest in something that you can develop your skill in over time, and then you really want to learn it, but you just, for the life of you, can't get it, right? So like me and math are not friends. I don't understand, don't care for it. It's like, I need a calculator for basic math. Like, I just don't get it. I wanted to be, you know, like way back when I was younger, I was like, I'm going to be, an archaeologist, or I'm going to be like an architect, right? Everything that required a lot of math. Not the right path for me, and gladly I didn't do it and went into the world of feelings instead. But I think that's the biggest thing. And the misconception is, like, when people and kids think about what should I be when I'm older, they get focused on like, oh, I'm going to be a coder. I'm going to be, a doctor. I'm going to be this. And then they get into it and they're like, wait a second, this sucks. I don't like it. Like, every lawyer I know hates being a lawyer, and it's like, no, look at what are you naturally good at, and then find career paths that service that.
Yeah, exactly. So true. So as we close out, just share your work. How can people reach and connect with you and contact you, and the amazing work you're doing? And then one last message to a person out there who is a man or woman that's sitting in prison, that's listening to this episode, that is like at the verge of giving up. What would you tell them?
Oh, gosh.
So those two questions will close out.
Oh my gosh. Okay. that I wish you asked me that a little earlier. Well, I'll start with the easy question.
Okay.
So you can find me, on my podcast, Reframing Perspectives with Payal Beri. And I'm on Instagram, Dr. Payal Beri, on LinkedIn. And you can also find me on my website, payalberi.com. I love to connect with people. My door is always open. Send me a DM and I will be happy to message with you.
It's true.
And a powerful message to someone who's on the verge of giving up. I'd ask you to take the power of pause. Take the power of just looking around and thinking about all the ways that you can actually take this moment to do something for even the cellmates that are around you. Do something of kindness and get curious about other people. That in itself, just having that gratitude of celebrating someone else, of celebrating, maybe someone was able to do something today that they weren't able to do yesterday, whatever it is. Maybe they didn't, they were able to finally eat their food. They're feeling a little bit better and you're just celebrating them. Having that kind of just love and giving that love, it's going to help you see that it's worth living and it's worth not giving up.
Beautiful. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.